If you had to describe Wanderers to someone who has not read it yet, how would you do it?
Sorry about 2020. I would definitely give them that little tip. I don't know. It's a pandemic novel, but it's not really about that. It's sort of a peri-apocalyptic novel about how multiple things can go viral, so to speak, and not just in a biological way, but bad information, disinformation, white supremacy, and how that can contribute to sort of the end of who we are.
Where did the idea come from? My book is 780 pages long, so maybe just tell us how long did it take to write, and where did the idea for this come from?
The idea came to me about 4 years before I started the book. And the core mechanism that came to me first was the idea of the sleepwalkers. The idea that people would come out of their houses one by one and begin sleepwalking ineluctably toward an unknown destination and for an unknown reason. But ideas are not that useful. As much as, I think writers give a lot of over credit to ideas, but ideas are not jewels or gems. They're just costume jewelry, and it's really on how you wear them. And I didn't have any story to go with that. I didn't have any characters. I didn't have any meaningful arc or point to it. I just had that kind of mechanism. So as we came into the 2015, up into the march up to 2016, the election here in America, all of my anxieties about the world, which are, climate change and post-antibiotics and obviously political, turmoil and white supremacy and artificial intelligence, and really just like kind of stack them on top of each other in sort of a Napoleon dessert of anxiety. It contextualized an entire story for me, centered around this sleepwalker narrative. So it kind of just unspooled out of me this whole thing. And from there, I wrote, I think it took me about 6 months to write a first draft, and then another 6 months to do like the editing, between a developmental edit and a copy at about another 6 months.
Wow, that's pretty fast, actually. That reminds me a bit of Stephen King, who can just churn out something quite substantial in a quick time.
It felt slow for me. I blew past the deadline. It felt slow for me.
I think it's pretty impressive considering how long it is. But the novel is very prescient. It was written before where we are right now, in the coronavirus pandemic. There are actually quite a number of books out at the moment that were written about pandemics, but that were written and some published before we knew what was going to happen. So I kind of feel like maybe writers have had this crystal ball that you guys are looking into and seeing what the future is like. I mean, do you have this feeling where you think kind of like, almost like a smug feeling like, see, I told you guys?
It's funny because like the novel is ostensibly science fiction, and science fiction authors are so very rarely writing about the future. We're really trying to write about the present, or in some cases even the past. Just the idea that a pandemic at all could hit. I mean, we have usually once every 10 years or so, we usually have something try to make that jump. And usually in a good world where we're handling things, they don't get as much of an opportunity, whether it's swine flu or SARS or MERS or whatever it is. But this one, we just lost eye on the ball, and it really took hold. And it's also a very good virus in what it does. It's it's good at what it does. So anything I predicted there was mostly like in white supremacy. I certainly didn't make that up. We all have seen it sort of out there. So it's just one of those things where I put it all together, but I don't feel particularly pressured. The one thing that did get me a little bit was there in the book, there's an artificial intelligence called Black Swan that predicts everything before it happens. And in reality, before people figured it out, there was an algorithm called Blue Dot that figured it out. So I was like, that's a little uncomfortable. It's Black Swan and Blue Dot. It's two colors, start with BL and two words. That was like a little like, I left something. I opened a door and something came out, and I'm very sorry about that.
I also wanted to ask, how much research did you have to do into diseases like, like viruses, like the fungus that appears in Wanderers? Did you have to do a lot of research? How accurate is it?
I'm fundamentally a very lazy writer, and so I everything that at least initially went into Wanderers was stuff I already was interested in. So there were things I had already researched, not for purposes of putting into a book specifically, but just because I think they're interesting in a sort of a fascinating and horrific way. Epidemiology and pandemics and artificial intelligence is all fascinating stuff to me. So I am both lazy and greedy in that I'm lazy in that I already did kind of a lot of the research, and then greedy because I wanted it all in this one book. I wanted to like shove as many snakes into the can as I could. That still necessitated more research after the fact to get details right. But the sort of the foundational layer was stuff I was already, learning and interested in.
Your book, for me, explored some of the best in humanity, but also some of the worst in humanity. Is that something that you specifically set out to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to write a book that was explicitly, well, people are the bad guys, and like in zombie fiction, generally speaking, the zombies are just an environmental hazard. They're like a hurricane or a flood, and the real danger is in how people treat each other in those times. I didn't want to lean only on that. I mean, obviously, with the militias sort of rising in the book, and sort of some bureaucratic incompetence, there's going to be some people. I can't have everybody be a shining paragon of goodness, but I really wanted also the sense of there being strong community, and to be ultimately good people banding together, not just a lone hero or something, but moving together in a way that's healthy and effective. And because I do find that in reality, cataclysm and crisis does not give way to immediate terror and people tearing each other apart. It usually results in people coming together, not perfectly and not 100% universally, but in a way that communities are often strengthened by crisis rather than torn apart by it. And so I really wanted Wanderers to have communities that were strong. The flock, the people that surround, or the shepherds, the people that surround the flock, and sort of all of and how that sort of grows as a mass. And how the country, begins to support them initially. And so I feel like that's interesting.
So the book also has a political focus. You've mentioned white supremacy, and also explores fundamentalism in religion. Are these also things that you deliberately wanted to explore?
Yeah, absolutely. Any sort of sense of extremism and how the interplay between white supremacy and that sort of right-wing evangelical Christianity, and how the one kind of hijacks the other for its purposes. I think that's a thing as we even see now, as things get more extreme politically, culturally. You see a sort of a reduction, almost like a reduced sauce. Like people get more impassioned about their fervorous beliefs, horrible beliefs in most cases, even despite the evidence to the contrary that it's not healthy or true or whatever it may be. People, the cognitive dissonance and the ability for people to sort of dig their heels in and believe things despite evidence to the contrary is one of those things that's fascinating to me. And then obviously outside of our door, we're seeing that take hold in certain pockets of not just this country, but globally. And so I felt like that was a useful thing to put into the book. And then just the fact that the nature of faith is a question in the book. There are two faithful protagonists, and one's a scientist, and I didn't want to, because at no point did I want to demonize the idea of faith or belief in a higher power or belief in religion. I think having a scientist who can still be faithful and still maintain some of that religion, despite being a scientist and despite everything that's going on, was an interesting counterbalance to someone who is kind of losing their focus and their path in that situation.
When people are done with this epic read, what is it that you want them to take away from the book?
I don't know that I want them to take anything away specifically. I'm not looking to be moralizing or preaching to them. I think there's a lot of things they can take away, but at the end of the day, my goal is to tell a good story and to have people read about characters they care about, and to I always say that the sort of the goal of a storyteller is to make people feel things and to make them think things. And if you can do both of those, feel things ideally first. I mean, the goal is to have you be connected emotionally to the characters and to the story and to what's happening, and then to unpack what it's trying to say or why it's trying to say those things. And it's not really my job to necessarily outline those in a sort of a bullet point fashion, and for you to find them, and to find that sometimes the book may disagree with itself, and that's okay too. There's a lot of, just because stuff is nuanced and nothing is really a perfect one-to-one.
What has the response been like to the book?
I think good. We had a lot of really great reviews, and sales have been strong. It's been up for a couple of awards, the Stoker and now for the Locus. It hit a few bestseller lists, so it was good. I think the response has been strong, and hopefully it'll continue to be strong. And I'm surprised that it's strong in the face of the actual pandemic that's now happening outside of our door. I didn't know if people would want to read about that sort of thing while living that sort of thing, and it turns out they do. So I'm both thankful for that, and also I get it, because I've certainly read. I mean, a lot of horror fiction I've read has been about things that I'm afraid of. I read Swan Song, which is about nuclear winter and a sort of the wasteland of America after a nuclear war. And I read that at the peak of my own personal, nuclear fear, because we were constantly being told that it was coming, that we're all going to get nuked by Russia into oblivion, whatever. And so I read that in the middle of that. Like, I sought that out and was fascinated by it. And honestly, I think it contextualized things and helped me, and gave me a sense of narrative and continuance despite sort of those anxieties. So maybe that's what people seek here too.
Yeah, catharsis, I think it is.
Catharsis, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely that for me. Just to end off, I just wanted to say I really, really enjoyed your book.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. It's big, but I flew through it. I couldn't stop.
I'll take that. If you can move fast through that book, that's good. That's a good time.
Well, this is that good. Chuck, thank you so much for taking time out to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.